Hello everyone. In this video, I will be showcasing how to utilize vector-based paths in order to create controlled motion animation in Adobe Animate. So let's get started. For this, I'm going to do a little bit of pre-production work. So I want to create an animation where there will be a train going above some hills across the screen. Now, this movie clip I just created is 15 FPS, as you can see on the right-hand side, and it's 1280 by 720. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring in artwork that I had pre-created in Illustrator. So let's go to Illustrator really quick so I can show you what that is. It's just this little train engine, and as you can see, each one of the parts that I want to animate has been separated into its own layer. So we have the back wheel, middle wheel, and the smoke. The rest of it is the engine body, and I'm not gonna do anything with that. So the wheels will be rotating and the smoke will be coming out of the spout and pushing back as it fades, just like if it were chugging along on a rail track. So what I want to do now is I want to go back to Animate and I want to bring in those files. Now, when I import files, as you know, from Illustrator or from a vector-based program, the files that come into Animate will be vector-based recognized. And what that means is because this program is a vector-based program, it will turn any vector path into an object over here inside Animate. What that means for you is that if you import a file that is vector-based, it will not come into the library when you import it. So you need to make sure that if your intent is for it to come into the library, you need to import to library, which is what we want to do right now, and I'll explain why in just a second. So let's go ahead and import into the library. I'm going to go to File, Import instead of Stage, which is what we've done in the past. I want to import to the library. So with that done, I am going to bring in the artwork into the actual library. The process is the same as importing any other file from either Illustrator or Photoshop. I'll select it and I'll click Open, and it will prompt me to say, what do you want to import? In this case, I want to import everything, and I want to make sure that I have animate layers. I want every layer in Illustrator to become a layer in Animate. So I'll go ahead and say Import, and you'll notice that nothing happened on the stage. However, in my library, I have a file that has been brought in from Illustrator, my Illustrator file, my train, and it is a graphic symbol. So it has been turned into a symbol for me already. So if I want to see what's inside that, all I need to do is just simply double click on the icon, and I'll see that I have the different layers that were created in Illustrator, which is great. Also, each one of the items belongs to its own layer, which allows me to quickly turn them into symbols so that I can go ahead and execute animation on them. And that way I can have that self-contained animation that then I can embed into my main timeline. So because this is a graphic, the fact that it is a graphic symbol means that if I were to create an animation here, I would have to match those frames here in my main timeline for it to work. That is, if I make this animation inside, I just double clicked on the icon here to get back into it. So if I want to animate this and I want to make that animation, let's say 1 second long, in order for me to see that animation in the main timeline, my main timeline needs to be 15 frames as well. And that's not necessarily what we want. What we want is for this to reside on its own little environment. So if I want that movie clip to play back, if I want that symbol to play back, no matter whether I have 1 frame of animation or 100 frames of animation on the main timeline, then I need to turn that from a graphic into a movie clip. So to do that, I'll go ahead and right-click the actual symbol on the stage, go to its properties, and switch from graphic type to movie clip type. Movie clip will play through and through, whether you have an hour's worth of animation and you put all that movie clip into 1 single frame on the main timeline. Once you render the movie, it will play back. Now, this is native to the ActionScript environment. So make sure that you understand that doing this forces you to export a SWF file in order for it to work. Because for HTML5, all animations are timeline based. Basically, HTML5 the suggestion is that your animations all need to play off on the main timeline, or any timelines that you have in graphics or movie clips need to be within matching that actual parameter within the parameters of the main movie. So if your main movie is 1 minute, then your animation should be 1 minute as well if you intend for them to play through and through. You can also loop animations, graphical animations. So it's something that you can do. But the advice is that if you're going to be, and that's for HTML5, if you're going to be working on AS3 or in the Swift format, then this is the best workflow because it allows you to embed animations even if you're only playing one frame on the main timeline. So with that done, what I'll go ahead and say is click OK on this so that it converts it from a graphic. You'll notice that my icon changed for that. Now that this little symbol is a gear. And now this animation will play no matter what. So I want to animate the wheels and the smoke. So let me go ahead and select those layers that I want to animate on this thing. And actually I want to convert them to symbols first. So I want to select this because remember I can only animate symbols. So I want to go ahead and turn, unless I want to do shapes, but these are not shapes. I want these to be symbols. So I want to convert these to symbols, and I want to call them just as their names are when they came in. So I'll make that a graphic. And this one as well, it's a graphic. And the reason why these are graphics is because they're only going to reside in this timeline. I'm not going to have them outside, or I'm not going to have anything internally inside them playing back. So for them to be a graphic is more than fine. Let's call this one smoke and click OK. Now let's go ahead and activate animation in those 3 layers. So I'll right click them and I'll say create motion tween please. And that basically tags them to animate for 1 second. Now I want this animation, let's say, to take, let's say 1 second. Let's start with that. So what I want to do first is I want to rotate the wheels. Now you'll notice that at the end frame, I don't see the engine. And part of the reason for that is because I only have 1 frame for that engine, the very first frame. So with that, let me expand this so we can see better. I want to select the last frame on the engine layer, and I want to press F5 on the keyboard so that I extend those frames. Now, with that done, what I want to do is now go ahead and tag the different layers for animation, or actually activate the animation. So in this one, the wheel in the back, I want to select the layer, place my time marker at the very end of that layer, go to the properties of the actual frame, and you'll notice down here I have the rotate values for the frame. So it's actually the frame that is indicating that it needs to rotate. So I'm going to go counterclockwise, and you'll notice that once I choose counterclockwise from the drop down, this says ×1, which means I'm going to have 1 rotation in 1 second, which is exactly what I want. Then I'll do the same thing for the second wheel here. Let me place my time marker at the very end of that. Counterclockwise, changes it to +1. If you want to increase the speed of rotation, then you would do ×2, ×3, and so on and so forth. And you actually can add extra degrees if you want to be more precise. And then for the smoke, what I want is for the smoke to come up this way and fade out. So it's going to come out small, small, and then as it moves out and increases in size, it disappears, which means I need to make sure that there's some sort of motion path and scaling values. So I need to determine when I want things to happen. So let's start with the beginning. How long do I want the animation to take place for that smoke? So I'm going to go to frame 9 in this case. And let's start at frame 9. So at frame 9, I want my animation to be where it's at, right there. So what I want to do is I want to right click on that frame, just frame 9, right click, and say insert keyframe all. That's what I want to do right now, so that it will actually create a keyframe for all the different transformation values that I can apply to that particular graphic at that point. That also makes sure that these 2 things match from this point to this point. And then I want to move that frame this way and up like that. So that created the path of motion between that frame and the end frame. Now let's go ahead and make this a smaller size. Just that smaller, like so. And then bring in this, the time marker to the beginning, select the first frame and make it small. Let me zoom in so that I can actually see better what I'm doing. Make it smaller. There it is. Whoops. Let me select that engine, block it, lock it so that I don't access it by accident. And I'm going to place it there. And you'll notice that my smoke is coming out, and then it kind of goes back. So what I want at this point is I want to make sure that that path that I have created sort of matches the spout. But you'll notice that I have very linear motion. You see that paths are basically straight. So if I want to make that a little bit curved, I need to make sure that I modify the curvature on that path. So I'm going to use my pen tools, the convert anchor point tool. Remember, this is a path just like any Bezier path. So if I use this tool, the convert anchor point tool, works just like it does in Illustrator. If I click and drag on that point, I'm actually creating a Bezier path. I can actually click on any of the anchors and click to define a Bezier handle. So this gives me more of a natural curve. Now that might be a little bit too much, so if I want to modify it, the tools work the same way as in Illustrator. So I'll select from my selection tool, I'll select the sub-selection tool or the A key on the keyboard, click on the anchor and modify as necessary. Now I see that my smoke is coming out pretty big, so I want to make sure that this is small here, and I want to change it with my free transform tool. That's small enough. Now maybe I want that smoke to be also the same size as this one right here. So if I right click on that and say copy properties, and then I paste properties on my second frame, it's going to move it down to this point, but it's going to match the size. So all I need to do now is go back and change the position of my smoke. And so now I make sure that the actual thing matches the size that I need it to match. So it's coming out small, and then at this point it should start increasing, which is what I want. So let's go back to the last frame and increase the size of the smoke again. And so now I have the smoke puffing out the way I need it to puff. With that done, I also want to change the alpha value of that smoke on the very last frame. So I'll select that last frame, and then I'll go to Effects, Alpha, and I'll make sure that I bring it down to 100%. So with that done, my smoke is going to be changing throughout, and that's because I didn't have an alpha value for this right here. So I'll select that, and I'll make it 100% at that point as well. So now it's going to be 100 to 0. That's how it's going to change. Boom. So there's the animation, the internal animation. Now, did I make this counterclockwise or clockwise? Let me double check really quick. Clockwise. Counterclockwise is what I want, so that the engine is actually moving forward. Got it. So now that's the animation. Remember, all of this happened within the train retraced symbol in the library. I'm still not on my main timeline. Remember, this is the movie clip that I had just brought in with the layers from Illustrator. So I animated all that stuff inside that movie clip. Now let's go to the main timeline. In the main timeline, what I want to do is I want to create sort of a mountain set. And this mountain set is going to showcase how basically it's going to give me the path through which I want to move the engine. So to do so, I want to go ahead and use the pen tool in this case to draw my path. And the reason why I'm using the pen tool and not you can use the pencil tool or the brush tool if you want to create that path. The problem is that, well, the pencil will give you an outline. The brush will give you a fill. So I want an outline. So you would use the pen tool or the line tool depending on how you want to create your path. The reason why I'm using the pen is because instead of the pencil is because when I draw with the pencil, I have nuances on the way my pencil is recognized by the program. So I get like a grainy pattern on the path, which will make it a little bit rough. And that's almost at a pixel level. So my animation will be jumpy all over the place. If I want this to be soft, then I want to use vector-based paths. And to do that, I'm going to use the pen tool. So I'm going to start outside of my stage area. So I want to start somewhere around here. I'm going to click and drag to create an anchor point, a Bezier point. So let's go ahead and do it. Oops. Let me go ahead and then click. Whoops, sorry. Let me go back to the main scene. Let me go ahead and click on this point, create a path. Then I'm going to click over here to create kind of like a mountain. Too far down. There we go. And then somewhere around here. And then the train goes away. Now let me go ahead and click down here, and close that. So now this is basically an outline of what the mountains will look like. Let's select the top, and you'll notice that only that portion of the path gets selected. If I select this path, only that portion of the path gets selected. So what I want to do is I want to create a fill for this. To create a fill for it, I want to just make sure that I have a good color. In this case, that green works. I'm going to use the bucket tool, and I'm going to click somewhere inside my path. So let me go ahead and click on the green again. Click with the bucket tool inside the path, and there you have it. I have created the fill for the path. Now I want to start removing these outlines that I don't need. I don't need this side or this side, so I'll delete that. I also don't need this portion right here. So I can go ahead and, since this is outside of the realm of what I will see on my final movie, I can simply drag a selection to delete all that, and that gives me this path. That's my complete path right here. Now I also need to have these two together. So I want to make sure that I maintain the top portion of the path. That's what I want. And the mountains are just there for background. So since this will be my background, let me tag that layer to call it background, BG. Okay. So that is my background layer. I double clicked on the label and I renamed it. What I want to do now is I want to bring in that animation into my stage. So first things first, let me go back to properties, deselect everything so that I see the properties for the movie clip. And then I change the stage color to something like a powder blue so that it is a nicer background. Now, let me go ahead and create a new layer. And this layer will be where the train goes. So I'll rename that layer train. And I'm going to go to the library and drag an instance of that movie clip onto the stage. So now if I play this on the stage right now, you'll notice that nothing happens because I only have one frame in my main stage. I know that that movie clip has animation inside it. So if I go ahead and press Control Enter or Command Return on the Mac, you will see that my animation is there. It is playing. So my animation is inside that movie clip. However, on the main stage, because I only have one frame of playback, it will not play. That animation took 15 frames. So you would think that if I extend my timeline on the main timeline to 15 frames, which I just did, if I play it back, I would see the animation, and yet I don't. And that is because, once again, animations inside movie clips are embedded. They are inside the movie clip. They will not play on the main timeline. They will only play when you render a movie, when you create a SWF file. So let me undo that stretch of frames and go back to where I want what I want to do, which is I want to move that engine across the screen, and I want that animation to take about 8 seconds. So let me reduce the visibility here to increase the visibility on my timeline. I want to see more frames. And 8 seconds is about right. So I'll go ahead and select these 2 frames right here on frame 8 seconds. And then I'm going to stretch my frames by pressing F5. Now both the background and my train layer have been stretched to that point. Now the train is what I want to animate. So let me place that train over here and right click on the layer, create motion tween. And now that layer has been tagged for animation. With the time marker at the very end of that particular layer, let me move it across the screen so that I create one basic path for the train to move across the screen. Now, before I do that, let me undo it really quick. And I forgot that I have my point of reference is that center point, that little circle that appears in the center of the symbol. That one is the point of reference from where anything's going to happen to that particular symbol. So what I want to do is I want to bring that down to the bottom of the engine. So with the free transform tool, go ahead and click on the white dot and bring it down. You can press shift if you want to snap to the bottom of the train. That's where I want it. That's what I want the center of gravity to be. And now I can go ahead and animate this across the screen. Now, with that done, you'll notice that the train is going to follow that path. What I need to do is replace that path with that path on top of my mountains. So I'll go back to my background layer, double click on the outline to select it, as you can see. And then I can copy that by going Command C, Control C, or Edit, Copy, either one of the 3. And then select the train layer and then Edit, Paste in Place, or Command Shift V, Control Shift V on the Mac. So paste in place, and you'll notice now that the path that I had just copied becomes the new motion path for my train. So my train is moving along nicely on the path. However, it is not following the path. It is not orienting to the path, and that's what I want. I want it to orient to the path. So in order to do so, I need to select my layer, the layer that I animated, go to the properties of the actual frame and make sure that I activate under the properties orient to path. Now you'll notice that the train basically orients now to the actual path, number one. Number two, you'll notice that every frame within my animation has become a keyframe. And that's okay. It's not adding extra rendering time to my movie clip. It is just adding extra frames. Before you do this orient to path, make sure that your animation is set to the time that you want it to be, how long you want it to be, and make sure that you that everything is pretty much set up to go, because making a change to this obviously can create problems. Because let's say, for example, I wanted to extend this to, say, frame 130. Now I just simply added extra frames to that, but you'll notice that my engine basically, actually it works to extend it this way when I stretch it this way. But if I press, let's say I want this to take 12 seconds in time. If I press F5, what's going to happen is my engine gets to a point, and at frame 8, it stops animating. You'll see that. So I literally added extensions to my last frame. That's when I use F5 to extend it, which is the most common workflow. And that could be a pitfall. If you wanted to stretch and actually extend the animation, you need to go to the last frame, and you'll notice that as you roll over the last end of that layer, you'll notice that at the very end, your cursor turns into those two little arrows. That means you can click and drag. And what you're doing is you're extending now the animation by hand. And that is going to extend, it's going to slow down your animation because you're actually adding time to your timeline. You're actually adding time to your animation. So if that is your intent, if your intent is to stretch it and you forgot if you had it tagged or not for orient to path or whatnot, if you want to make sure that your frames sort of get stretched in time, meaning you're slowing down your animation, or you are decreasing, you're increasing the speed by reducing the amount of the time that it takes to make the animation by moving that upstream, then you need to make sure that you click and drag on the end of the layer, not use F5 or Shift F5 to remove frames. Keep that in mind. Okay, so with this done, how do I see if this is working? Well, I can play it back like this, but I'm not seeing the animation inside the train. I don't see the smoke puffing, and I don't see anything happening in there. So I want to see that. I actually worked hard for it. So I want to make sure that I actually see it. So how do I see that animation? You need to test the animation. To do so, remember, Command Return or Control Enter on the PC. So Control Enter, and that creates a Swift file for you. And in the Swift file, you should see the actual animation of the smoke puffing, and it's a bit jumpy because of the screen capture software that I'm using, but the wheels are turning in place. So you actually have the animation playing back rather nicely. And that is how you apply a path to a layer that you want to animate to control the actual motion path in which it will be animated. Now, what if I'm not working with regular motion, like in this case, I'm working with just motion tween? What if I'm working with the old version, the classic version of motion tweening? Well, let's create a new movie really quick, and I am going to utilize the same settings that I had from the previous one. So I'll just simply go ahead and click OK on whatever comes up. There it is, 640 by 480. That's fine, 15 FPS. I'm going to click on that, and on this one, I want to import one of the symbols. I don't want to create a new symbol, so I'll go to the library, and you'll notice that I don't have anything because it's a brand new movie. But because I have the previous movie open on Title 1, it becomes available to me under the drop-down for the libraries because it's open. So I can go to that library for the previous movie, and I have access to all of its assets. So I can go ahead and import stuff from here onto this particular movie. So if I were to choose, let's say, wheel 1, and I drop wheel 1 in there, I see that that becomes now part of this movie, which in turn, if I go to its library under Untitled 2, I should see that graphic there. So with that done, let me go ahead and put this wheel here. And what I want to do is I want to create something similar to what I did on the other one. I want to make sure that this graphic sort of moves along on a path. But in this case, I want to use classic tweening. So how do I do that? Well, it's fairly simple. All you need to do is create what we call a guide layer. So to create a guide layer, we basically have the wheel here. So that is my wheel layer. And I want to create a guide layer. So I'll create a new layer, double click and I rename it guide so that I know what it is. And in the guide layer, I will create an actual path same way. I'm going to use, in this case, I'm simply going to create something like this. And then I'm going to switch my tool to the selection tool. So in this case, I'm not going to create a mountain. I'm simply just going to create a path to showcase how to do this. So in order for this to work, again, you need to have a vector guide, which is this. And you need to have an actual movie clip, which in this case is a graphical wheel one. And I want that wheel to follow that particular path. So how to do that? Well, first things first, you need to make your guide layer a guide layer. So to do so, right-click the layer and choose guide from the drop menu. So you can just go ahead and say guide layer. Now that turns it into a guide layer, as you can see, and it changed the symbol for it. If I want that layer below it to become basically to be tagged to that particular layer, I need to activate animation on it first. So let's go ahead and extend these things to about 3 seconds. Press F5 to extend both layers. And I am going to tag this layer to have classic tween, not motion tween, but classic tween. Remember the purple one. And then what I want to do is on that first keyframe, I want to place that somewhere around here close to that path. And then I'm going to go to the end and I'm going to move this to the other side to create a keyframe for that second position. Now, with that done, what I want to do is if you notice, I basically have motion of the wheel going across the screen. I want to attach that wheel to the guide. So to do so, all I need to do is simply drag that layer from the icon onto the other layer. You will see now that I have this black little bar that appears between the two layers. That is either it's left aligned or right underneath the guide layer. I want it to be underneath the guide layer. And so that wheel becomes a child of that layer. It becomes a sub layer to that guide. So if I let go when it is underneath as a sub child, not the left aligned one, but over here, then that wheel now attaches itself to the guide, and the guide layer turns into a classic guide layer, which is the little one with the little dots. And if you notice, my wheel follows that particular path. I can turn off the visibility of my guide now, and the wheel will still follow that path. The advantage of working in this format is that now I can go ahead and create new things. So if, let's say, for example, I wanted to have another layer following the exact same path. Well, let me turn on the path really quick so we can see it. Let's go to the library and bring in another instance of that wheel under a new layer. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, and notice that my layer now is indented. The new layer is indented. I can always take it out and push it up or push it to the left hand side if I want to. There you go. But in this case, I want it to be underneath, just like the wheel layer. This will be my wheel 2 layer. And in this case, the wheel 2 layer will also will be using that path. So I'm going to right click it, create classic tween, and you'll notice that now that wheel attaches itself to the path, expecting for me to do something. So let me go ahead and move this all the way to the beginning of the path so that it snaps to it, you'll see. And then go to that very end of the timeline for that, create a frame for it by dragging it to this side, and you'll notice that the wheel, both wheels are using the exact same guide, so I have more than one item utilizing the guides, which is extremely helpful. So there's advantages and disadvantages for working with things. I find it that the previous format, this one, it's a lot easier for me to work with, and that is because my workflow, having worked in After Effects and having worked in Maya, I find that defining paths with vector-based paths makes my life a lot easier in order to manipulate it by redrawing those paths when I need to. But for a lot of people, this workflow works just as fine because it gives them the advantage of having more than one item utilizing the same path. So you only have one path and you have several items following that exact same path. So it's a choice on your workflow. A lot of people who work with Animate today choose to work with classic tweening because it is closer to hand-drawn animation. It gives them a little bit more flexibility. It also matches really well the workflow for Toon Boom. So if you work with Toon Boom, this will be fairly familiar to you as well. So again, there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of choice. You pick which one you want to utilize in your workflow, and whatever works best for you is what you should follow. So this is how you use paths to create motion paths for movie clip animation.